You see people living in vans, traveling the world, posting sunset photos while you are struggling to pay rent. And you wonder, how the hell do they afford that lifestyle? Are they trust fund kids, digital nomads making bank, living off unemployment benefits? Well, I can't speak for everyone, but I can tell you exactly how I have funded 7 years of van life. And I want to be upfront from the start. Even though I go several months without employment, I have never been on unemployment benefit. I believe that that service should be reserved for people who actually cannot work rather than for people who choose an alternative lifestyle. And honestly, I was shocked when I got to number 12. I would have never thought that I had 12 jobs in the last 7 years. It certainly doesn't feel like that. And that doesn't count all the volunteering gigs I did, only the jobs I actually got paid for. When I first got my van, I wasn't planning to become a nomad. I had what many people would consider a dream job. I was a flight operations controller. Not air traffic control, just to be clear, but the person working for an airline, doing flight planning, crew rostering, and handling all the chaos when things go wrong. Weather delays, sick crew members, aircraft breakdowns, I dealt with it all. The pay was excellent, I only worked 4 days a week, and I had amazing coworkers. Honestly, I still miss it sometimes. I especially loved the night shifts. Just imagine, empty offices, complete silence, 2 monitors, flight planning software on one screen, Netflix on the other. Living the dream, right? I will never forget my first solo weekend shift. I was the only person in the entire building responsible for just one flight, from Perth to Christmas Island to Cocos Island and back. It was supposed to be chill. The pilots were joking about strong winds, even suggesting which hotel they would want if they had to divert to Jakarta. I warned the customer about the weather, but they wanted to proceed anyway. And guess where they ended up? Of course, in Jakarta. I had no training on international diversions. I had no idea about ground handling in there, customs, immigration, booking hotels. It was a disaster. So, of course, I have called my supervisor and my manager, and somehow we put it together. There was no manual at that time because that situation hasn't happened for years. Well, the very next day we started to write a manual. Moving into my van wasn't about travel initially. I just wanted my own space without flatmates and unnecessary bills. Maybe some weekend camping, but the longer I lived in that van, the more I realized how little I actually need. I started questioning everything. Why am I selling my time? What's all this money for? Is missing out on life worth it? Then my perfect job started falling apart. New management came in. My incredible boss left. Honestly, the best I have ever had. My favorite coworkers followed. Finally, I quit too. Lost and searching for direction, I did what many confused millennials do. I went to Peru for an ayahuasca retreat to find my purpose. While it was interesting, and I felt the after effects for years, it didn't exactly give me a career roadmap. The only thing I knew for sure was that I needed to leave the North Island. So I moved south and made it as far as Kaikoura, where I took my first survival job. Checkout operator at New World Supermarket. Hello, how are you? Having a nice day? Love your glasses. Repeat 500 times. It was mind-numbing. And the belt was too low for tall people, destroying my back. I lasted for about 4 months. During COVID, I worked part-time as an administrator for a helicopter company. And I felt so guilty working there because it was a tourism-dependent business and there was no tourists. So some days I had absolutely nothing to do and I still got paid. I felt so awful. But please turn it off. Thank you. But hey, they were essentially paying me to study for my instructor rating, and I made the most of it. And when I finished my instructor rating, it was just after COVID, and understandably the Aero Club told me that unfortunately they are still struggling and they cannot hire me yet. And so I also picked up waitressing at a pub. I had always avoided hospitality because I feared having to handle meat, but a Czech friend basically dragged me there. The coworkers were great, but I really hated those end-of-night cleanups. When the promised flying job in Kaikoura kept getting dangled like a carrot, but never materialized, I finally decided to move back north to escape another harsh winter. Ended up in Whangarei working at a waterfront restaurant. Spectacular location. There was even a cat living on a houseboat with its own little bridge to shore. But I didn't enjoy working with these people. It was soul-crushing. Not sure how long I was there, maybe like 3 months. I guess I'm not really cut out for hospitality. It's an awful job for me. It doesn't mean that I do a bad job, but I think it's one of the easiest ways to get a job while traveling, because these places seem to be always hiring. Oftentimes I just got in, talked to the manager and started work the next day. And if you are a barista or a chef, it's even easier. Next came what might be the worst job of my life, kiwifruit pruning near Tauranga. They say pruning is the hardest job in the kiwifruit industry, and they are not lying. Weeks of agonizing back pain for someone my height. The irony is that the next job, thinning, is supposedly ridiculously easy. The farms often let you stay in your van, you have a kitchen, showers, place to socialize. But I was the only one in the camp, because nobody else was crazy enough to live in a van in winter. I left the orchard for a Vipassana meditation retreat, and from there the universe seemed to be sending signs pointing towards Waiheke Island. I worked there as an operations administrator for a bus company and a driver/tour guide for wine tasting tours. The bus company offered a 3-month contract, but they didn't mean it quite literally, so I stayed an extra month. But then I had to continue on my journey. The wine tour guiding was seasonal by nature, and I absolutely loved it. Showing people around, sharing stories, seeing them enjoy themselves, and a lot of paid downtime while they were munching on their appetizers. I would do that again in a heartbeat. But Australia was calling, and I went back to Kaikoura to say goodbye to my friends and to renew my instructor rating, as I needed it current to convert to Australia. I picked up some pub shifts for last-minute cash. And then when I organized everything, I sold my van, I bought the flight tickets, I lined up house sitting for the first month in Sydney, I booked volunteering. And then the manager of the Aero Club was like, "Hey, do you want a job or not?" After all that waiting, and to this day I don't know if he was actually being serious or if he knew that after I have booked everything and pretty much said goodbye to everyone that I will be forced to say no, but he's gonna look like he kept his promise, right? So off to Sydney I went, where I bought my current van and drove across the continent to Exmouth. There I volunteered on whale shark swimming boats. Honestly, some of the best time of my life. I have published a video about that experience. Then I headed to the Northern Territory, where everyone said pilots go to get their first job. Instead, I ended up packing mangoes. 2 months of living in Darwin convinced me no pilot job was worth living in hell. The pack house was air-conditioned, but those brutal hot nights in the van were torture. The job was a pure chaos. The conveyor belts were running on full speed. If you couldn't keep up, the fruit was falling on the floor. When your conveyor belt slowed down a little bit, you would run and help your coworkers who were drowning in their fruit. And you still had to inspect each fruit for quality. Absolute madness. So I decided to drive back south to more bearable temperatures. I remember one day I drove 1000 kilometers in that one day because stopping meant death by heat stroke. I stopped to volunteer at Monkey Maya with wild dolphins. before landing what would become my most lucrative job, working in a nickel mine. A Czech girl who worked there slipped my CV to her boss, and apparently he was quite impressed that I had a pilot's license. So one could say that a pilot's license helped me to land a job in the mines. The work-life balance was incredible. 1 week on, 1 week off. I have made another video about my work in the mines, so I will leave it here. I planned to stay a year and save serious money, but the mine closed after 8 months. At least I didn't have to feel guilty about leaving. And it was there where I met a fellow mine coworker, and he was driving the road trains, and he was like, "It's an awesome job, you should get your license, you should do it too." And so I looked into it, and I found out that I needed to hold a heavy rigid license for a year before getting multi-combination license. So I got my heavy rigid and decided real world HR experience would help land a road train job later. And let me tell you, finding the first HR job was actually very difficult. Employers didn't recognize my mining experience as relevant because you don't drive the truck on the road. One guy offered me $32 per hour, which was way less than what I was getting in the mines, but I was going to accept it because by that time I understood that I would be lucky to actually get that first job. But in the end he decided for somebody else, and I'm actually grateful for that now because in my current job I get paid much better than what he was offering. So, whew. My current employer must have been quite desperate, hiring someone without a real experience and a woman on top of that. That's not to say that we are not capable, but let's face it, I am essentially driving a rubbish truck. It's quite a dirty work, and people tell me that they actually haven't seen another female skip truck driver before. If you happen to know one, please tell her I said hi. I actually love this job's autonomy. I can listen to my podcasts or books. I can think about my next video ideas. This is something that I didn't have when I was, for example, waitressing, where you cannot even glance on your phone. So I do not feel like my whole day is completely wasted by working and not being able to do my own things. And I'm planning to depart after 6 months, so I will be quitting sometime in November, and I already feel incredibly guilty about it. I really hate letting people down. But hey, they didn't interview me, they didn't ask about any long-term plans of mine, so at least I didn't make any false promises. But I really hope that this is the last job that's not temporary or seasonal by default. So, the reality is, VanLife isn't funded by trust funds or passive income for most of us. It's funded by flexibility, willingness to take any job, and accepting that your career path will be unconventional and your CV might be longer than the Constitution of the Czech Republic. Some jobs were amazing, others were absolute hell, but each one funded the next adventure and taught me something new. The freedom isn't free, but for me, it's been worth every weird job, every early morning, every sore back. Because at the end of the day, I'm living life on my own terms. If you are thinking about making a similar leap, I would love to hear your story. What's holding you back? What jobs are you curious about? Drop a comment below and maybe subscribe for more honest takes on this lifestyle. Trust me, there are plenty more stories where these came from. Until next time, keep dreaming and maybe start planning. Your adventure is closer than you think.